Hello and welcome back to Analysis Review. The Eurozone crisis is back with a vengeance. An inconclusive election in Greece saw big gains for populists and extremists, but gave no one party a working majority. It did, however, send one clear message. Voters are fed up with austerity, but international lenders say there is no alternative. So with both sides at loggerheads, the question that many feared all along is now on the agenda. What if Greece exits the euro? With me to discuss this are Peggy Hollinger, FT leader writer, and our capital markets editor, Richard Milne. Welcome to you both. Peggy, start with you. After that election result, have we moved closer to the point where we ask, is it time for Greece to go, or it's inevitable?
Well, I think there has to be a risk, doesn't there, after the election this weekend? I mean, one of the real key questions here is just how badly do the Greeks want to stay in the euro? It's up to them to decide. 70% say that they want to stay in the euro, and yet they vote in a collection, diverse collection of political parties, many anti-austerity. They haven't made up their minds yet.
Right, but it's still, ultimately, they've got to make the decision.
They have to make the decision. Yeah. It's up to them to decide.
Right. Richard, it's not the first time that we've been here looking at this scenario. Is this any different?
Well, yeah, I think both from the policymaker side and the market side, every time something happens with Greece, people hope it's the last time we're going to have to deal with Greece, and it just comes back again and again. I think it is different. It's more serious. We're
but
reaching
why?
real.
Why? What is it because
fatigue.
It's gone political that basically now we're seeing the leadership has essentially the established leadership has lost control? I
think you reached the limit in both the debtor countries like Greece and in creditor countries like Germany of what's acceptable, what's possible. And you also see, you know, if Greece were to leave the euro, I mean, it's not going to do it in a nice, smooth way. This is going to be messy. It's going to be horrible. The question is just how horrible.
You could say markets have now had quite a long time to prepare. I mean, put bluntly, do they care anymore? One hears that a lot of the banks have written down their stuff, their exposures to.
And there is an argument that it wouldn't be as disastrous for the Eurozone if Greece exited now, as opposed to 2 years ago, when we were in a much worse state to actually deal with it. We've had 2 years to think about it. We've had 2 years to plan for it. Clearly, there must be a plan B for an exit of Greece. We all want Greece to stay in. But if it has to go, it has to go. And I think that actually we're much more resilient.
Well, and I think you saw that when Greece did default just a couple of months ago. You did see that resilience. But there is still that Lehman question. In a sense, we sort of prepared ourselves for that default. But I don't think we've prepared ourselves for a kind of uncontrolled default. And this thing, it wouldn't happen according to a timetable. They wouldn't sort of say, well, this weekend we're going to do it. We'll just wake up one morning and it will have happened. And those kind of shock events like Lehman Brothers, to me, you know, the market rarely prices that in perfectly.
So there's still a lot of uncertainty. But Peggy, put this just for us in a bit of the bigger European picture. Obviously, the other big story, France, the election of François Hollande, who said he wants to a change in policy, a growth pact, not just a fiscal compact. We've had banks on the rocks in Spain. We've even had an interesting shift in Germany with the Bundesbank saying they could live with a little bit of inflation. Do you see a sort of broader readjustment of the crisis response strategy that we've seen for the past couple of years that you referred to?
I think we're seeing a shift certainly in sentiment. I think it's very clear, Richard said it, that there is politically, there's a line now being drawn that the citizens can only take so much austerity, that we have to have a discourse and indeed a policy that includes growth alongside austerity. I mean, let's face it, nobody wants to be constantly in this never-ending cycle of depression. We actually want to have hope for the future, and I think that's what that's about. I think in France, there was the election that brought the socialists to power, but you have to understand that yes, there was an anti-austerity element, and his discourse of growth offered more hope than just austerity, but it was also a vote against Nicolas Sarkozy because the voters just don't like him, the French don't like him. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, there is a shift. It does look like Germany is becoming slightly more flexible. I mean, we shouldn't get overexcited. It doesn't mean everything's going to change overnight. But I think it is encouraging that we're now recognizing there has to be both austerity and growth.
How will markets see that? Will they buy into that? Because the argument of the austerity crowd is always we can't do anything else, otherwise the investors will flee.
Well, markets want it both ways in a sense. They punish countries when they think there's not going to be enough austerity, and then they get hugely worried that there's going to be no growth. I think most investors like the idea of a focus on growth. There's actually been, you know, maybe even a majority view that maybe the Hollande victory was quite helpful. I think what you're going to see is, you know, growth means very different things to different people, and I think people like
Exactly.
Mr. Hollande
Absolutely.
is very much infrastructure spending, you know, ploughing money into the economy, and Germany and the ECB are very much about supporting growth through structural reforms. And you know, so potentially we're just going to have another debate, but fierce debate, but just on a different topic. So.
Just going back to Greece before we've finished, I mean, it looks, Peggy, now as though we're heading possibly for a second election. I mean, do you see a hardening of the situation we got from the election that's just gone, with populists like Alexis Tsipras, who pictured here, getting more votes, and that we just the stalemate is entrenched? Or could it be that the establishment parties pull it back, that we've had such a shock from this result that it's kind of they I mean, I doesn't want to put, you know, a judgment on it, but, you know, they come to their senses.
Well, I think at the end of the day, no one knows exactly how voters are going to vote. But I think we could hopefully look at this. The optimistic view would be to look at this in the context that perhaps this was the first round of an election where you vote with your heart, you protest, you say we don't like it, very French style, and in the second round you vote with your head. And there is some evidence to suggest that actually the mainstream parties will pull it back. Now, what compromises they'll have to make in the meantime to pull it back, we don't know. But I think, you know, if I would prefer to be an optimist and hope that the Greeks will be realistic.
Right. Richard, how will investors see that? Can they cope with all these populists? I mean, they're not just in Greece, there's other places as well. We had some popping up in Italy and also in Northern Europe.
I mean, they'd like to regard Greece as a sideshow. That's what they really want to do.
So where are they? They're focused on, is it more Portugal, Spain?
Well, I think Spain is, I mean, we had the nationalisation of Bankia, you know, deep fears about the state of the banking industry there, and really, is Spain too big to fail, too big to bail, whatever the phrase you want to use. So, I mean, I think that's still there. And Greece comes back in that discussion through contagion, because if Greece goes, then I think the problem is just, you know, will lenders be willing, will Germany be willing to bail out Spain if they've just lost lots of money in Greece? So
the crisis that won't go away, unfortunately, but we also now have to go away because we're at the end of our time. Thank you, Peggy Hollinger, thank you, Richard Milne, and thank you for watching. And keep up with these stories and others with more news and in-depth analysis of the Greece question and the Eurozone at ft.com/analysis. Until the next time, goodbye.